Every morning at exactly 6:30, something happened in a quiet neighborhood that made people stop. Because right on time, a tiny girl in a pink coat stepped out of her building, followed by 6 enormous German Shepherd canine dogs walking beside her, as if they were her personal bodyguards. Cars slowed down. People stopped talking. Phones came out to record her. She never smiled, never talked to anyone. She just held the leashes tight, as if she was scared to let go. And the dogs treated her like she was the most important person in the world. People whispered the same questions every day. Who is this child? Where are her parents? Still, no one understood the truth. Sometimes the girl paused mid-walk, and without a single word, the dogs immediately tightened around her, as if they were protecting her from something dangerous. Then one cold morning, something unbelievable happened. The girl walked out like usual, but this time, the dogs suddenly froze. Their bodies stiffened. Their eyes sharpened, locked on something no one else could see. And then the little girl broke. She burst into tears, her tiny hands shaking as she clutched the leashes. People rushed toward her, confused and worried. Why were the dogs protecting her like their lives depended on it? Why did the little girl look terrified instead of surprised? What they discovered next shocked everyone. The little girl was hiding a secret so big, so unbelievable, that when the truth finally came out, the entire city stood frozen. Stay with us, because this unbelievable story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Every morning, just before sunrise, the neighborhood looked peaceful and half asleep. Streetlights flickered quietly, a thin layer of mist floated above the grass, and only a few early joggers moved slowly through the cool air. But right at 6:30 a.m., something happened that made the entire street pause. A tiny little girl, no older than 5, stepped out of her building wearing the same soft pink coat she always wore. Her hair, tied in a small ponytail, bounced gently against her shoulders as she walked. But she never walked alone. Beside her were 6 fully trained police dogs, moving with the discipline of officers on duty. Massive German Shepherds, tall and powerful, walking in perfect sync around her small frame. They didn't pull the leashes. They didn't bark. They didn't chase anything. Instead, they marched beside her with calm confidence, as if guarding someone far more important than she appeared. Neighbors who spotted her through their windows always froze mid-task. A woman making tea would stop pouring. A man tying his shoes would lift his head in disbelief. The sight never made sense. How could such a small child handle police dogs trained for crime scenes, rescue missions, and dangerous operations? Yet she did, effortlessly. Joggers slowed down when passing her, giving respectful distance. Drivers paused at stop signs longer than necessary, watching the girl and her dogs move across the street like a tiny commander leading her silent team. Even people walking their pets crossed to the other side, sensing something powerful and serious in the air. The routine never changed. The girl always walked the same path. The dogs always stayed alert. The quiet streets always seemed safer when they appeared. Sometimes the girl paused at the end of the block. Without a single word, 2 police dogs moved ahead, scanning the street. 2 stayed by her sides. 2 positioned themselves behind her. It wasn't random behavior. It was formation, the kind officers used when guarding someone vulnerable or facing possible danger. And yet, the child never seemed afraid. She walked with a soft, steady rhythm. Her tiny hands held the leashes gently, as if she trusted the dogs with her life. People whispered about her daily. Where are her parents? Why does she walk police dogs? Is she being trained for something? Or is someone protecting her? Every morning, the same silent question echoed through the neighborhood. Why would 6 police dogs obey a little girl? Like she was the only person in the world that mattered? It didn't take long for people to realize that these weren't ordinary dogs. They were police dogs, trained for danger, discipline, and protection. And every morning, they behaved in ways that left the neighborhood uneasy and fascinated at the same time. While most pets sniffed grass, barked at birds, or pulled excitedly on leashes, These dogs moved with purpose. Sharp eyes, silent steps, bodies tense, scanning everything around the little girl as if they were guarding a high-risk target. Whenever she walked, the dogs formed a natural barrier around her. Not too close, not too far, just enough to block anything that came near. If a jogger approached from behind, 2 dogs instantly fell back to flank her. If someone walked toward her from the front, the lead dog stiffened, lowering its head, watching every step the stranger took. None of this came from the girl's commands. She never spoke. She never tugged the leashes. It was as if the dogs acted on instinct, an instinct drilled into them through years of training. Their reactions grew more alarming as days passed. One morning, a car door slammed across the street, and all 6 dogs immediately snapped to attention. Their ears shot up. Their tails stiffened. Their eyes locked on the noise. The girl, startled, clutched the leashes tightly, but the dogs moved faster, shifting into a protective half-circle around her. People watering their gardens paused mid-motion, watching in silence as the police dogs evaluated the harmless sound like a potential threat. Even something as simple as a deliveryman walking by caused tension. The dogs would track him with cold, controlled precision. Not barking, but ready. Always ready. The little girl, however, didn't show the carefree joy children usually had around animals. She didn't skip. She didn't chase butterflies. She didn't laugh. Instead, she walked quietly, her eyes kept low, her shoulders slightly hunched. The more the dogs reacted, the more nervous she seemed, like she expected danger at any moment. Once, a curious neighbor leaned down to greet her softly. "Hello, sweetheart, what are their names?" Before the girl could answer, the nearest police dog stepped between them, blocking the woman completely. Not with aggression, but with firm, unshakable authority. The woman froze. The girl whispered something so quietly it was impossible to hear. Then she tugged the leashes gently, and the dogs moved on. People began whispering after that moment. Why are they guarding her like this? Police dogs only behave this way when someone is in danger. Is something happening inside her home? The dogs weren't just alert. They were on duty. And whatever they sensed around that little girl, it wasn't harmless. It took only a few weeks for the entire neighborhood to become consumed by curiosity. The little girl with the 6 police dogs had become an early morning mystery, one that people couldn't stop watching and couldn't stop talking about. At first, the sight seemed harmless, a child walking well-trained dogs. But the more people observed, the more unsettling details they noticed. Conversations began forming outside bakeries, on porches, and in quiet driveways. Where are her parents? Why does a child walk police dogs alone? Have you seen how they guard her? That's not normal. Some neighbors tried brushing it off. Maybe her father is a trainer, one man suggested. Maybe the dogs are retired and harmless, another said. But no one truly believed that. Police dogs didn't behave like pets. They behaved like soldiers, and soldiers didn't act that way without a reason. More whispers followed. A woman at the bus stop shared her theory. "I heard she doesn't live with her parents. Someone else takes care of her." A man fixing his mailbox added quietly, "I think something's wrong in that house." The dogs always looked tense. The more they talked, the heavier the air felt. People watched her walks with a strange mix of fascination and guilt. They saw her tiny hands gripping the leashes too tightly. They saw her flinch at sudden noises. They noticed how the dogs never left even an inch of space between her and the world. Rumors spread faster than truth. Some said she came from a police family. Some said she was being trained for canine work. Others whispered darker possibilities. What if she's not safe at home? What if the dogs are protecting her from someone? But the one question that echoed through the neighborhood day after day was the one no one dared to answer. Why would 6 trained police dogs follow a small girl like she was the only person they trusted? The silence of the girl didn't help either. She never spoke to neighbors. She never smiled. She never waved. She simply walked with eyes lowered, gripping the leashes as if letting go would be dangerous. One morning, a group of kids riding scooters slowed down as she passed. She looked scared, one whispered. She looks alone, another added. And though the girl walked on, pretending not to hear, one of the police dogs turned its head sharply toward the children, its stare so intense they fell silent instantly. Day after day, the whispers grew louder, heavier, more worried. People didn't just wonder who the girl was anymore. They wondered what she was hiding, and what the police dogs already knew. On a cold Tuesday morning, when the neighborhood was just beginning to stretch awake, a moving truck pulled up beside the old brick apartment building. A man named Ethan, quiet by nature and observant by habit, stepped out carrying a box labeled kitchen. He was new to the area, new enough that he didn't know the whispers, the rumors, or the mystery that walked these streets at sunrise. While unloading his boxes, he noticed neighbors glancing at their watches, peeking out windows, and standing on porches as if waiting for something. Ethan didn't understand the strange anticipation until he heard the soft rhythm of synchronized footsteps. He turned and froze. A tiny little girl in a pink coat walked down the sidewalk, holding 6 leashes attached to 6 massive police dogs. They didn't pull ahead. They didn't tangle the leashes. They moved with controlled precision, heads forward, body steady, eyes scanning every corner like trained officers searching for threats. Ethan blinked hard. He had worked briefly with a security firm in the past. He had seen trained police dogs before, but he had never seen them act like this. As the group approached, he noticed something even more unsettling. The girl wasn't leading them. They were leading her. The lead dog slowed just enough to guide her to the safest part of the sidewalk. Another positioned itself between her and the parked cars. 2 more walked slightly ahead, monitoring movement up the street. Their coordination was too perfect to be coincidence. No child should have this kind of relationship with police dogs unless they were protecting her from something. Ethan stepped back, giving them space, but the dogs still noticed him. 4 of them turned their heads slightly, just enough for their eyes to study him, evaluate him, judge him, not as a neighbor, but as a potential threat. The girl didn't look up. She only tightened her grip on the leashes and kept walking with quiet, practiced steps, as if this routine was the only thing keeping her world steady. When they passed Ethan's moving truck, one of the police dogs paused. Its ears perked, nose lifting slightly as if catching a scent. Ethan held his breath, unsure if he should move. The girl gently tugged the leash, whispering a soft, barely audible sound. The dog obeyed instantly. Ethan watched them turn the corner, disappearing down the street in perfect formation. His heart beat faster than he wanted to admit. He didn't know the neighborhood gossip. He didn't know the whispers from the past weeks. He didn't know the stories people repeated in hushed voices. But after seeing those dogs, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't a morning walk. This was protection. And whatever those police dogs were guarding that little girl from, it was real. The next morning, Ethan made sure he was outside early. He told himself he was just getting fresh air, but the truth was obvious. He couldn't stop thinking about the little girl and her 6 police dogs. Something about their behavior, their precision, their constant alertness, none of it felt normal. As expected, right at sunrise, the girl appeared at the end of the street. The police dogs walked beside her in their usual formation, 2 leading, 2 guarding the sides, 2 closing in behind her. Their eyes scanned the quiet neighborhood with sharp focus, reading every movement like trained officers. But today, something in the air felt heavier. Ethan sensed it before he saw it. A man in a dark hoodie stepped out from behind a parked van. His movement was too quick, too nervous, too deliberate. He pretended not to notice the girl, but his eyes flicked toward her, just for half a second. That was all it took. The police dogs reacted instantly. The 2 lead dogs dropped into a defensive stance, blocking the path. The side dogs shifted inward, tightening the formation around the girl. The rear dogs moved forward, closing the gap until she stood inside a perfect protective circle. The man froze mid-step, startled by their sudden aggression. One of the dogs let out a deep guttural growl, a sound so fierce and raw it made Ethan's heart jolt. This wasn't a warning bark. This was the kind of growl police dogs used during real danger. The girl stiffened, her hands trembling around the leashes. "Hey, easy," the man muttered, lifting his hands. But the dogs weren't interested in his words. They didn't blink. They didn't soften. They stood like an unbreakable wall, shielding the girl with their bodies. Ethan crossed the street quickly but cautiously. "Sir," he called out, "maybe step back." The man hesitated, then took a fast step away, too fast. The dogs surged forward a single step, barking sharply, their teeth bared just enough to send a message. "Do not come closer." The man cursed under his breath and hurried off, disappearing behind the same van he came from. Only then did the dogs relax their stance, but not fully. Their tails stayed low. Their ears remained locked in the direction the man had vanished. Their bodies stayed firm, ready for another threat. The girl looked down, her breath shaky. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. Her reaction was worse. She acted like she had seen this before. Ethan crouched down, a few steps away. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. She simply whispered something the dogs seemed to understand, and they continued walking, still alert, still guarding her like she was a fragile secret. Ethan watched her disappear around the corner, his stomach tight. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That wasn't a coincidence. Those police dogs weren't acting out of instinct. They were responding to danger. Danger the little girl already knew too well. For the rest of the day, Ethan couldn't shake the image of the girl's trembling hands after the incident with the man in the hoodie. The police dogs had acted like a trained strike team, reacting to danger long before any adult noticed. But what unsettled Ethan most wasn't the dogs. It was the girl. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She didn't act surprised. She reacted like someone who had lived through fear many times before, too many times for a child her age. The next morning, sunlight had barely touched the rooftops when Ethan stepped outside again. He wasn't pretending anymore. He was waiting, watching, hoping yesterday had been a one-time event. But the moment the little girl appeared, he sensed the difference. Her shoulders were hunched. Her steps were slower. Her face looked pale, as if she hadn't slept all night. The police dogs stayed even closer than usual, brushing their bodies against her legs as if trying to hold her steady. Their eyes were sharper, their breathing heavier, their movements more controlled. They seemed on edge, like they were expecting something to happen. As she passed Ethan's building, a car door slammed down the street. It was harmless, accidental. But the girl flinched so violently the leashes slipped from her hands for a split second. Instantly, the police dogs sprang into action. Two moved in front, blocking her from the noise. Two pressed against her sides, stabilizing her. Two positioned themselves behind her, watching for threats. The girl took a shaky breath, wiping her eyes quickly, hoping no one saw. But Ethan did. This wasn't just fear. This was trauma. He stepped forward a little. "Hey, it's okay. It was just a car door." The nearest police dog snapped its head toward him, not aggressive, but firm, warning him to keep his distance. Ethan lifted his hands and stepped back slowly. "I'm not trying to scare her," he whispered. The dog blinked once, then returned its attention to the girl. As she continued her walk, a neighbor watering her garden waved gently. "Morning, sweetheart." The girl hesitated. She looked at the woman for half a second. Her eyes filled with something heavy, something unspoken. Then she lowered her head again and walked faster. The police dogs tightened formation. The neighbor lowered her watering can. "Poor child," she murmured. "Something's wrong. I can feel it." Ethan felt the same chill. The girl wasn't just afraid of strangers. She wasn't reacting to random noises. She was reacting to memories, memories that police dogs recognized and guarded her against with every breath. Whatever had happened to her, she hadn't escaped it. She was still living it. The following morning, the neighborhood felt unusually still. Even the birds seemed quieter, as if the whole street sensed something unspoken hanging in the air. Ethan stood near his front steps again, pretending to tidy a potted plant, but his eyes were fixed on the sidewalk. He wasn't the only one. A few neighbors lingered outside longer than usual, each one waiting to see if the little girl would appear. At the usual time, she did. But today, she looked even smaller inside her pink coat. Her hair wasn't neatly tied. Her steps were slow, cautious. The 6 police dogs walked around her in a tighter formation than ever before, almost touching her sides with every step. Their heads remained low, ears pricked forward, watching everything. As she passed by, Mrs. Delaney, a retired schoolteacher known for her gentle nature, decided to speak to her. She stepped forward with a warm smile. "Good morning, sweetheart. Are you all right?" The girl froze. Not like a shy child embarrassed by attention, but like someone who had been caught. She turned her head slowly, just enough to acknowledge the woman, and that's when the sleeve of her coat slipped back a little. It revealed a glimpse of her wrist, and Ethan's breath caught. A dark bruise. Small, narrow, finger-shaped. The kind that didn't come from falling. The kind that came from someone grabbing too hard. Before Mrs. Delaney could react, the girl yanked her sleeve down quickly, her face flushing with panic. Her eyes darted around, terrified that someone had seen. The movement was too fast, too practiced, like she had done this before. The police dogs reacted instantly. The closest dog stepped in front of the girl, blocking Mrs. Delaney's view. Another positioned itself between the girl and the street. The entire pack tightened around her in a protective shell, their bodies rigid, their eyes scanning for whoever, or whatever, had hurt her. Mrs. Delaney raised her hands gently. "Oh, honey, it's okay. I didn't mean to scare you." But the girl shook her head and looked at her with a pleading expression. Her eyes, big, dark, and filled with fear, held a message she couldn't speak aloud. "Please don't ask. Please don't say anything. Please don't make it worse." Ethan felt a chill run through him. This wasn't normal fear. This wasn't simple shyness. This was a child guarding a secret with everything she had. And the police dogs. They knew. They nudged her gently, guiding her forward, insisting they needed to leave. She whispered something only they could hear, and the pack moved as one, swift, protective, urgent. As they disappeared down the street, Mrs. Delaney whispered, "Something's wrong. That child is hiding more than we think." Ethan nodded slowly. For the first time, the danger felt close. Too close. And that bruise on her wrist was only the beginning. The next morning arrived heavy and gray, with clouds hanging low over the rooftops. Ethan stepped outside again, trying to act casual, but he wasn't alone. Several neighbors lingered on porches, pretending to read newspapers or sip tea, all waiting for the same thing. When the little girl finally appeared, the street seemed to hold its breath. Her pink coat looked slightly wrinkled, her ponytail uneven, as if she had gotten ready in a hurry. But what worried Ethan the most was the expression on her face. She wasn't just tired. She looked frightened, the kind of fear that sinks deep inside a child and refuses to leave. The 6 police dogs sensed it instantly. Normally, the girl led the walk, even if the dogs stayed close. She would take a step, and they would follow in perfect alignment. But today, something subtle, but terrifying, changed. The dogs moved first. One of the lead shepherds nudged her gently toward the right, away from her usual path. The girl hesitated, looking back at her apartment window, where the curtains remained tightly closed. The dog nudged again, firmer this time. She obeyed. The rest of the police dogs tightened their formation, their bodies pressing protectively around her as they gently steered her down the street. It wasn't random. It wasn't playful. It was strategic, as if they were guiding her away from something unsafe. Ethan stepped closer, pretending to tie his shoe. He noticed that every few seconds, the girl glanced over her shoulder, toward the building she had just left. Her eyes widened each time, and she quickly turned away, as though afraid someone was watching. The police dogs noticed too. All of them. Their ears twitched toward the same window. Their tails lowered. Their muscles stiffened slightly, as if preparing for confrontation. A low growl rippled through the pack, soft but filled with warning. Ethan followed their gaze. A shadow moved behind the closed curtains. He couldn't see who it was, but the girl did. Her breath hitched, and she clutched the leashes with trembling hands. The police dogs reacted instantly, pushing her forward with gentle but urgent nudges, guiding her farther and farther from the apartment. One neighbor stepped outside and waved at the girl. "Everything all right, sweetie?" Before the girl could answer, the nearest police dog stepped between them, blocking the neighbor completely. The girl looked down, hiding her shaking fingers behind the dog's fur. Ethan's pulse quickened. He had seen police dogs behave like this once before during an evacuation drill when they were trained to escort someone away from danger. This wasn't a walk. This wasn't a routine. This was an escape. And the girl didn't lead the dogs this time because the dogs knew exactly where she needed to go. Away. That night, long after the neighborhood had settled into silence, Ethan sat by his living room window, finishing the last of his unpacking. The street outside was calm and dim, washed in the soft glow of streetlights. It should have been peaceful. It should have felt safe. But something about the air felt wrong. Ethan didn't know why he kept glancing at the little girl's apartment building until he heard it. A faint sound. Barely a whisper. A small, trembling cry. He froze. At first, he wondered if he had imagined it. But then it came again, muffled, shaky, heartbreaking. The kind of cry a child makes when she's trying very, very hard not to be heard. Ethan pushed his window open slightly. The cold night air rushed in, carrying the sound more clearly. It was coming from her apartment. His chest tightened. Something was happening behind those closed curtains. Just as he stood to step outside, he heard another sound, this one much closer. A scratching. Urgent. Desperate. Ethan stepped onto his porch and looked toward the girl's building. His breath caught. One of the police dogs was standing at her front door, violently scratching at the wood, whining with a panic Ethan had never seen in an animal trained for control. Its ears were pinned back, its eyes wild with worry. A moment later, another dog appeared. Then another. Within seconds, all 6 police dogs gathered at the door, pacing, whining, scratching, throwing desperate glances toward the second-floor window. Ethan whispered, "What on earth?" The dogs didn't look at him. They didn't bark. They didn't run away. They stayed fixed on that front door, as if trying to break it down with pure determination. Then the cry came again, sharper this time. The dogs reacted instantly. 2 jumped up, pawing at the window ledge. 1 paced in circles. Another lifted its head and let out a deep, trembling howl. The kind a police dog gives only during extreme distress. Ethan felt his pulse thundering in his ears. This wasn't normal. This wasn't random. This was alarm. Police dogs didn't cry like this without reason. They didn't gather like this unless someone inside needed help. A neighbor cracked her door open across the street. "Do you hear that? Is that her?" Ethan nodded, unable to speak as he watched one of the dogs press its nose to the crack beneath the apartment door and whine as if begging the girl to come out. Whatever was happening inside that home, the girl was crying for help. And the police dogs, her only protectors, were trying to get someone to notice. Ethan took a step forward, heart pounding. He knew one thing for certain now. The girl wasn't in danger someday. She was in danger right now. The next morning, the street was unusually quiet. Even the usual early risers moved slower, glancing nervously at the little girl's apartment building. No one had slept well, not after hearing the heartbreaking cries and seeing the police dogs desperately scratching at her door. Ethan barely slept at all. He sat near the window for hours, listening, waiting, hoping the sound wouldn't return. When the sun finally rose, he rushed outside the moment he heard footsteps. The girl appeared, but she didn't look like the child he'd seen before. Her face was pale. Her eyes were swollen. Her pink coat hung loosely on her shoulders, as if she had put it on in the dark. She clutched the leashes with shaking hands, and the 6 police dogs surrounded her like shadows, silent, tense, ready. They weren't walking her. They were escorting her. Just like yesterday, but this time more urgent. Ethan stepped forward gently. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" Before she could respond, the nearest police dog stepped between them, its stare fierce, not aggressive, but protective. Ethan froze. The dog's eyes said everything. She is not safe enough to talk. As the girl moved down the street, Officer Ramirez, who happened to be driving by, slowed his patrol car. His brow furrowed the moment he saw the formation of the dogs, tight, controlled, high alert. He parked and stepped out. "Everything all right here?" The girl's grip tightened. Her breathing quickened. The dogs formed a perfect guard stance around her, front dogs low and stiff, side dogs bracing, back dogs watching every angle. This wasn't normal behavior. This was protocol. Ramirez's voice softened. "Sweetheart, did something happen at home?" The girl didn't answer. She lowered her head, hiding behind the dogs, as though afraid that speaking might cause trouble. Ethan stepped beside the officer quietly. "Last night, I heard crying. And the dogs, they were trying to get inside. Something is going on in that house." Ramirez didn't dismiss it. He knew police dogs never panicked without reason. He crouched down, studying their stance, the way they breathed, the direction they kept looking, straight toward the apartment building. "These dogs aren't acting like pets," he murmured. "They're responding to danger. Real danger." Ethan nodded grimly. "I think she's in trouble." Ramirez stood. His decision was immediate. "We need to check the home. Now." The girl stiffened, but the dogs didn't resist. In fact, they seemed relieved. As the officer approached the building, the entire pack followed at his heels, pulling gently on the leashes, as if urging him to hurry. Ethan's stomach twisted. The truth wasn't just close. It was waiting behind that door. And the police dogs already knew what he didn't. Something in that house was about to change everything. Officer Ramirez didn't waste another second. With Ethan close behind him and the 6 police dogs guiding the way, he marched toward the little girl's apartment building. The dogs were no longer quiet. They moved with urgency, whining sharply, glancing back at the girl as if begging the adults to understand the danger she couldn't voice. The moment they reached the entrance, one of the police dogs rushed ahead and bounded up the stairs. The others followed, pulling the girl gently but firmly behind them. Ramirez and Ethan hurried after them, and when they reached the second-floor landing, the sight made both men stop cold. All 6 police dogs were gathered at the girl's apartment door, scratching, sniffing, pushing their bodies against it as if trying to break it open. Their tails were low. Their ears were pinned back. Their breathing was fast and distressed. Police dogs didn't behave like this unless someone inside was hurt, or worse. Ramirez knocked loudly. "Police, open the door." Silence. He tried again, harder this time. "Is anyone in there? This is a welfare check." Still nothing. But the dogs reacted. They suddenly left the door and ran toward a small hallway closet beside the apartment. One dog began pawing at the floor. Another lowered its head, sniffing intensely. A third let out a deep, trembling bark that echoed down the corridor. Ethan's stomach dropped. "They're tracking something." Ramirez stepped forward and pressed his ear to the closet floor. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a faint thump. A weak movement. Barely there, but real. Ramirez's voice hardened. "Someone is beneath this floor." He forced the apartment door open, and the police dogs surged inside, not wildly, but with precise direction, as though they had known all along where to go. They rushed past the living room, past the kitchen, straight toward a small storage room at the back of the apartment. The door was locked. The dogs began barking frantically, pushing their bodies against it, claws scraping the wood. Ramirez didn't hesitate. He kicked the lock once, twice, then the door burst open. At the far side of the room was a hidden door leading down to a basement. The smell of dust and fear drifted upward. The dogs bolted down the stairs, whining loudly. Ethan and the officer followed, and when their eyes adjusted to the dim light, they froze. There, lying on the cold concrete floor, weak, injured, barely conscious, was a man. His leg twisted beneath him, his face pale, his breathing shallow. The oldest police dog ran to him immediately, pressing its head against his chest. The man lifted a trembling hand. "Lily," he whispered. "My daughter." Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. The girl's father hadn't abandoned her. He hadn't disappeared. He had been here all along, hurt, trapped, and fighting to stay alive. The basement felt heavy, thick with dust, fear, and the kind of silence that comes after days of suffering. Officer Ramirez hurried down the steps, flashlight trembling in his hand. Ethan followed behind him, heart pounding. The police dogs circled the injured man, their bodies shaking with the relief of finally reaching him. They whimpered softly, nudging his shoulders, licking his hands, begging him to stay awake. The man's eyes fluttered open at the sound of his daughter's name being whispered from above. "Lily, she okay?" he rasped. Ethan knelt beside him. "She's safe. She's right upstairs." A weak breath escaped the man's lips, half relief, half pain. His leg was severely swollen, twisted at an unnatural angle. Dirt covered his clothes, and his face was pale with exhaustion. It was clear he had been trapped down here for days. Ramirez leaned closer. "Sir, what happened? Who did this to you?" The man swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "My sister, Lily's aunt. She was supposed to help after my injury. But when I couldn't move, she changed. She wanted custody of Lily, said I wasn't capable of caring for her anymore." He winced, clutching his side. "She pushed me," he continued weakly. "I fell down the stairs. Couldn't get up. She locked the door. She left. She took Lily's phone. She said nobody would believe me." The police dogs released a low chorus of whines, grief, anger, loyalty, all mixed together. They pressed against him as if trying to share their warmth, their strength. Ramirez clenched his jaw. "You been down here this whole time?" "3 days, maybe 4, the man whispered. "I lost track. No food, no water. But the dogs, they stayed. They tried to dig, tried to get help." His voice trembled with emotion. "They protected Lily. They never left her side." A tear rolled down his cheek. "She's so brave," he whispered. "I told the dogs, if anything ever happens to me, they must obey Lily. They must keep her safe, no matter what." Ethan felt a tightness in his throat. Everything made sense now. The dogs' formation, their tension, their desperation. They weren't overreacting. They were following a command drilled into them by a father who feared the worst. Ramirez stood. "We're getting you out of here. An ambulance is on the way." The man nodded shakily. His eyes drifted toward the stairs. "Please," he whispered, "don't let my sister take Lily. She's not safe with her." At that exact moment, Lily appeared at the top of the basement steps, her tiny figure trembling, her eyes wide and wet. "Daddy," she whispered, and the man's entire body softened, relief washing through him like a tide. He had survived for one reason, because he knew his daughter needed him. As paramedics lifted Lily's father onto a stretcher, the 6 police dogs followed every movement with trembling bodies and worried eyes. They didn't bark. They didn't panic. They watched him the same way trained officers watch a fallen teammate, broken but determined to keep protecting what mattered. Lily stood frozen at the bottom of the basement steps. Her small hands clutched the railing, her eyes locked on her father's pale face. She didn't cry loudly. She didn't scream. The pain inside her was too deep for sound. One of the police dogs nudged her gently, pressing its head into her shoulder as if reminding her, "You're not alone." Officer Ramirez crouched beside her. "Lily, sweetheart, can you tell us what happened? We want to help you." Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. For a moment, she stayed silent. Then she looked at the dogs, each one watching her with fierce devotion. It was as if they were waiting for her permission to let the truth out. Finally, in a soft, trembling voice, she spoke. "Daddy trained them," she whispered. "All of them." Ramirez nodded gently. "Your father was a K-9 handler?" Lily nodded. "He trained police dogs to save people, to protect them, to listen to commands even when they were scared." Her voice cracked. "He said they're not just dogs, they're family." Ethan swallowed hard. Lily continued, her words slow and heavy. "When Daddy got hurt last month, Aunt came to stay with us. She said she'd help, but she got angry a lot. She yelled. She pulled my arm when I didn't move fast." Lily instinctively touched her bruised wrist. "Daddy told the dogs to stay close to me. He said if anything bad ever happened, they should protect me." Her voice lowered to a whisper. "He told them. I'm their leader if he's not there." Ramirez's breath caught. Lily wiped another tear. "When Daddy fell down the stairs, I tried to open the door, but Aunt locked it. She said Daddy wasn't coming back. She said the dogs were mine now, and I should stop asking for him." Her lips trembled, but the dogs never believed her. They kept scratching the door. They howled at night. They knew he was still there. The dogs pressed closer to Lily, forming a protective ring around her. Even in this safe moment. It was instinct, training, love. Ethan's voice softened. So every morning, you walk them to get help? Lily nodded slowly. I hope someone would notice the way they acted. Daddy said people who understand dogs, they listen with their eyes. Ramirez felt a lump rise in his throat. This little girl wasn't commanding 6 police dogs out of strength. She was leading them out of necessity, because her father had trusted her with the only protection she had left. And the dogs obeyed her, not because she was powerful, but because she was precious. The ambulance's sirens faded into the distance, but the impact of its departure lingered heavily in the air. Lily stood on the sidewalk clutching the leashes, her small fingers trembling as she watched the flashing lights disappear. She didn't speak. She didn't move. It was as if her whole world had been carried away on that stretcher. The 6 police dogs stood around her like a living shield, silent, alert, and deeply aware of her heartbreak. One rested its head against her hip, nudging her gently every few seconds. Another pressed close behind her, offering warmth and steadying her shaking shoulders. They weren't just guarding her. They were grieving with her. Officer Ramirez approached slowly. Lily, we need to take you to the station for a little while, he said softly. We need to make sure you're safe. The girl flinched, not at his tone, but at the word safe. She looked up at him with eyes full of fear, then quickly shifted closer to the dogs. Before she could answer, the dogs reacted on her behalf. They moved into formation, positioning themselves between her and the officer. Their message was clear. Where she goes, they go. Ramirez raised his hands in reassurance. It's okay. They can come too. That small promise loosened the tension in her face. She didn't speak, but she gave the slightest nod. Together, girl and dogs followed the officers to the patrol car. The dogs trotted beside her like trained escorts, guiding a VIP through dangerous territory. At the station, paramedics checked Lily for injuries. The moment a medic reached for her wrist, one of the dogs gently wedged itself between them, placing its body as a barrier. The medic froze. It's all right, Ramirez said softly. Let her stay with them. Lily stroked the dog's back. It's okay, she whispered, and only then did the dog step aside. Hours passed. Officers took statements, searched records, and issued an alert for Lily's aunt. Meanwhile, the police dogs lay curled around Lily's chair, their eyes never leaving her face, not even for a second. Then, as dusk settled outside, the phone rang. Ramirez answered, listened, and exhaled with a mixture of relief and emotion. He walked toward Lily with a soft smile. Your dad made it, he said. He's stable. He woke up asking for you. Lily covered her face, her tiny shoulders shaking, not with fear this time, but overwhelming relief. The dogs responded instantly, lifting their heads, tails thumping softly against the floor. They knew. They felt it. The officers stepped aside, watching a sight they would never forget. 6 police dogs circling the little girl, not as guards, but as family, comforting her as she silently cried for the father she almost lost. The rescue hadn't just saved a life. It had saved a bond between a father, his daughter, and the loyal protectors who refused to abandon them. The story spread through the town faster than anyone expected. By the next morning, everyone knew about the little girl with the 6 police dogs, the hidden basement, and the father who had been trapped for days. But what stunned people the most wasn't the tragedy. It was the loyalty of the dogs and the strength of the child they protected. Neighbors who once whispered behind curtains now stood outside the police station, waiting for news, offering blankets, food, and anything that might help. They watched through the glass windows as Lily sat in a chair, surrounded by her 6 dogs curled around her like a living fortress. Not one of them slept. Not one relaxed. Their eyes remained alert, guarding her even now. When an officer opened the door to escort Lily to the hospital, the dogs rose instantly. 6 trained protectors, moving in perfect sync around her. The crowd parted, silent with awe, as the girl walked through with her small hand gripping 3 leashes in each tiny fist. At the hospital, the moment Lily stepped into her father's room, everything changed. Her father lay on the bed, weak, bruised, but alive. His eyes fluttered open, and when he saw her, tears filled them before he could speak. "Lily," he whispered. She rushed to his side, placing her small hand gently in his. The police dogs settled around the bed, forming a circle of warmth and protection. The oldest shepherd rested its head on the mattress near the father's arm, letting out a soft whine, the kind of sound only a dog makes when finally reunited with the person it would die for. "You did so well," her father whispered. "You kept her safe. All of you." Lily leaned against him, tears soaking into his hospital gown. "Daddy, I didn't know if you were coming back." He stroked her hair slowly. "I never stopped trying." Outside the room, nurses and officers paused to watch. Some wiped their eyes. Others whispered about the unbelievable bond between the girl and her police dogs. Word spread quickly. The dogs didn't just protect her. They saved her life. And her father's. Over the next days, the town stepped in to support Lily and her recovering father. Strangers brought meals. Officers visited daily. Children drew pictures of her with the police dogs. The neighborhood that once whispered now stood together, ready to help. And the 6 police dogs? They remained by Lily's side, faithful, disciplined, unshakably loyal. People finally understood the truth. The little girl never controlled the police dogs because of strength or authority. She controlled them because her father had trusted her with their loyalty. And they carried out that promise with every breath. The story ended not with fear, but with family. A father healing, a daughter safe, and 6 heroic police dogs who had proven beyond doubt that love is the strongest command they ever learned. This story teaches us that courage doesn't always come from strength. Sometimes it comes from love, loyalty, and the will to protect others. The police dogs showed how deeply animals understand danger and how powerfully they respond when someone they care about is in harm's way. It reminds us to pay attention to the silent signals children show, because fear is not always spoken, it is felt. And most importantly, it shows that a supportive community can save lives. When people listen, notice, and act with kindness, even the most vulnerable among us can finally find safety, hope, and healing.